Today we're going to talk a little bit about the use and care of the hand carts to make sure that they remain in a good condition for use later on and for other stays. So today we're going to talk about unloading the hand carts from the trailer, assembling a hand cart, and getting them loaded back up into the trailer. So let's get started. Okay, today we're going to be talking about getting these hand carts unloaded. So to get the logs off of the trailer, it usually requires two people to push in on some of these latches to swing that open. We're going to open, we do another one. Oh, sorry. Same thing on the other side. Of course, you'll be lowering the ramp on level ground. You want to make sure you're on level ground so you don't damage the door. And as you can see, we're parked on level ground. I'm going to slowly lower the ramp. Okay, first of all, we need to get the stuff out of the way so we can start unloading the hand carts. And what we need to do is just get everything out of the way. And it's always good to have several people helping you. Okay. For reference, this thing will always be in all of the trailers. This thing shows you how all these trailers are loaded and how they're loaded within the wheel racks. And on the other side, it also shows how all the hand cart frames are loaded. So you got to have one of these. Just want to make sure that you see it as we're taking this out, that you'll know that you'll need to refer to this. Okay, to unload this 13th axle on every trailer, they're hung by this support right here, as you'll see, and they sit in between all of the wheels here. So you need two people to unscrew this a little bit, loosen it up enough that you can unhook. Tell me when you're ready. Okay, I'm off on this side. Okay, now being careful. Just pull everything back, trying not to ruin anything or your body. Okay, to remove the wheel handset, you've got to undo these bolts on the sides. And you don't want to lose these bolts. They shouldn't be on very tight anyway. I either put these in my pocket or I just set them up here so they don't get lost. And of course these bars are fit a certain way on every hand cart. Everything is marked so it goes in the right spot. If you don't put them in the right order and orientation, it will not fit. And so I want to show right here. This one here is we're in trailer number 1, which you can see right here. Trailer number 1. Trailer, this is the number 1. This is the rear bar. There's the right side and there's the left side. That's how this bar goes in. This holds the wheels down and keeps them from rolling backwards and forwards. Please be careful with these not to bend the tabs. So handle with care. Okay, the trailers are configured to hold 2 racks each. So there's this rear rack and a forward rack. Each of these racks hold roughly 6 wheel sets, and stacked below them are all the associated chassis frames for each of these components. So if you only need 6 hand carts from this trailer, everything is contained right at the very end. Nothing is intermixed. So you have to make sure that you load these the proper way in accordance with that loading diagram. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing rolled out. Can we get some help here? Now this rack is very heavy, so you have to be very careful. This thing will run over you. You want to come down and make sure you avoid the cables, because these hubs stick out. You may need someone to come along the side and hold that out, just in case. Very heavy rack. Okay. Good. If you're on the ground, what you might want to do is have a block of wood that you can put in between the wheels to keep you from going forward or backwards. You don't want it to roll over anybody. And then what we need to do is you're going to have these things tied off in here. So just to undo everything, go ahead. And this is how the first thing to do on unloading a rack, we'll just move right into it. And I'm going to have you set these over here, Darian. Is pick up your hoops. They're all packed in a nice package like this, so remember that. And let's just set those over there on the ground. Next thing we need to do, you want to take note of all of these things. You might even want to take some pictures for yourself. It makes a good reference if you're unloading. This is how everything looks like on the rack. This is how it should be loaded. So you want to make sure that you're very careful with all these components. One of the weakest things on these hand carts is these little tabs. They're real thin right here. But you want to make sure that you handle these with care. When you're unloading these, you'll notice that there's numbers on the bottom of these with arrows. All of these are serialized to the specific hand cart that we'll be putting together. So you want to make sure that they're sitting up so you can see those. Okay, now we're going to unload the chassis or the frames from the trailer. And that is done by removing these 4 bolts at each of the corner. Well, there's actually 6, I'm sorry. Note the arrows and the numbering because they match. So show right here. This is 1H because we're in trailer number 1. 1H. Here's an arrow pointing forward. This is all very important. Notice these things are not on really tight. They're almost finger tight. You don't want to bend them down or you'll bend the bracket. So you want to undo these on all 4 corners. Save the hardware. Just set it right down in the corner there. Again, these don't have to be tight. They're all finger tight. This just keeps the chassis from coming up off the floor in transport. So here's the other ones. We're just going to set them on the floor so we know where they're always at. Okay. And you want 3 people doing this. If you want to back up, and then Darian, I'm going to have you stand at the front on the handle on the outside. What you're going to do is just lift the handle up and tilt it at the back. Give us space to get our fingers underneath. Just go ahead and lift. We're going to come out. This is how every frame should be unloaded with at least 2 people. Let's go that way. You guys want to sit right here? I'm going to go get a blanket and we decide if this is the right one or not.
Well, this is 13.
Oh,
so
okay.
No, it's not.
Of course, out on the trek, you're not going to have concrete out there, so we're going to simulate the ground. And we always want to protect the hand carts. So we're going to put out a couple of blankets.
Darian, swing over here.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to put mine in. You lift. You keep lifting yours. That way I can help.
Okay. So we're simulating Mother Earth here. Okay, go ahead and lay it down. Okay, now we're going to remove the wheel sets from the wheel set rack. And that's done by these knobs here on the top. There is 2 knobs for each axle. And on the bottom, there are 2 knobs for each axle. So we're going to show you how to take the top one off. Always save these parts. Don't lose them, because if you don't have them, they will not be secure. I'm going to show you how to lift these off. The best way to do this is support the hub. Just be careful when you're lifting. You got to go up and off. Hand carts can be wheeled around pretty easy. Okay. Unload. Today we're just going to unload the components to put together one hand cart. But you can have somebody lay underneath because all of the numbers for the side frames are underneath. So he's going to pick, we're going to do cart number 13. He's going to push up the ones that are number 13. We're going to carefully slide these forward. And yeah, the other set of 13. It should be a total of 4. These right here. Okay. So I'm going to show them something right here. So as you can see the number 13, and you can see the letters. There'll be 13A, B, C, and D. You have 2 long sides and 2 short sides with the letters 13, or the numbers 13. There's A, B, C, and D, and we'll show you how to put those together a little later. Okay. Okay, every handcart is marked in accordance with this chassis number. We have chassis number 13. We'll show you that number in a moment. This axle wheel set, this is number 13, and there's an arrow. Also on these, we've welded in the numbers too to make sure they don't ever get lost, and there's an arrow. These arrows always point forward when they're in the position on the handcart. So if you look here, and the handcart, this flange is on one side. These flanges will always be up. So you have to be careful of that. So the arrow is pointing forward, and our handcart is over here and the handle's here. So these arrows always point towards the handle. So we need to turn this around. Number 13, arrow forward, tab up, and then we're going to show how these come in here. Okay, so good one. Even your hardware is marked by we'll have the number of the handcart here is number 13, and then showing the frame on the top. Right there is the number 13A, and that will also show where the side frames go. But the numbers of the carts are also, let's show them under here. Right here on all the handcarts. Number 13, you have to make sure that all these things are laid out. And you'll see other labeling, that's a J and an H. We'll show you what those are later. We're going to go ahead and get things ready for putting the axle set on. You can do this either, if you do this out on the ground, obviously if you're out in the dirt, you don't want to do this. You might want to have someone put that a canopy out or something to put your hardware on. So put your hardware on something. We're going to actually simulate with an actual canopy. You always want to keep track of all your hardware, because you know what, you are out on the prairie and you can't go to the local hardware store. And we are looking for 4 long bolts. These are the instructions for the handcart, and you will be given these. There's about 4 pages of instructions, but what I want to point out here, you should read these actually and not just rely on this video. This picture here is actual size, so you guys can actually take your stuff, lay it out, and this is the actual size of the hardware. Same thing with, these are called your T-nuts. They match. What's critical is the length of these hardware. You guys can see that this is quite a long one. And there's 2 of these that are really close in length. There you go. Can you see that okay? These 2 are only 5 millimeters in difference in length, but that's critical. You have to make sure you know which one those are. You can see how they match up. A lot of them have yellow marking on it, so you know it's a short one. You have to make sure you separate those 4, okay? And we'll show you that later. The tools we're going to use to assemble the handcart, 9/16 socket wrench and 5 millimeter Allen wrenches. And we'll show you how those are to be used. So right now we're going to put the axle set up to the frame, and we need to get the blocks.